When Neil Armstrong first stepped on the moon in July 1969, it was not merely the end of a quarter-million-mile trip or the winning of a political challenge, but was instead the culmination of the efforts of hundreds of thousands of Americans working to create a brand new technology. Between 1969 and 1972, America's Apollo space program successfully sent 6 two-man crews to explore the lunar surface. The exploits of these 12 rather common-looking men captured the attention and imagination of the entire world. These are the uncommon stories of the members of a most elite fraternity, the fraternity of Moonwalkers.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills. Because that challenge is one that we're willing to accept, one we are unwilling to postpone, and one we intend to win, and the others too.
I don't think we realized at the time, how absurd and ridiculous it was. It was a crazy goal. I mean, like, it was a lunatic thing to do. And I think all the people that were involved with doing it knew it was a lunatic thing to do. I mean, they were landing on the moon 7 years after Kennedy said, "Get started." And that's a lot to achieve in 7 years.
We were struggling mightily to figure out how to use the Atlas rocket and the spacecraft and so on, and to accomplish this relatively modest goal of getting a man in Earth orbit. Somewhat unbeknownst to me, the discussions were going on about the going to the moon. And when I heard that announced, I mean, it was like a major shock to me, because the challenges that we had in putting this little 2,000-pound capsule into Earth orbit were plenty big enough.
I believe this was probably the most dangerous period of space flight, because the spaceships that we were flying were not particularly reliable. The technology was very primitive at that period of time, but we had the guts and the courage and the belief that this quest, the search in space, this process of discovering this new environment, was worth this risk.
When we chose astronauts, we wanted people who were willing to subject themselves to the rigors of flying in space, as well as the dangers of flying in space. And so it was our feeling that the people that could do that job satisfactorily were test pilots. They were used to flying in high-performance machines daily, used to putting their lives on the line, used to making decisions when their lives were on the line.
When we flew Mercury, we had 4 manned orbital flights, Mercury 6, 7, 8, and 9. The Gemini program, the 2-man vehicle that we built and flew in the early 60s, mid-60s, was a tremendous contribution to the space program, because it added so much to our competence and experience with operational kind of things in space flight.
One of the things that they did was that they took bigger risks than they take now, Every one of those flights was a risk. After Apollo 1, they lost 3 people in Apollo 1, and they still fixed it, and they were flying to the moon a year and a half later.
But we would not have been able to get on with the lunar program that aggressively, and as we did then to Apollo 11 6 months later, if we didn't have a great big body of experience in the middle and that built the confidence in the team and the hardware that the Gemini program provided.
The Saturn V rocket that would take 3 astronauts to the moon was by far the most complex piece of machinery ever built. It was over 400 feet tall, weighed over 6.5 million pounds, and had over 6 million parts in it. The command module, located on top of this rocket, was where the 3-man crew stayed during their journey to and from the moon. The fragile-looking lunar module was designed to take 2 of the astronauts to the lunar surface, while the 3rd astronaut remained in lunar orbit in the command module. Even if the rocket functioned at 99.99% efficiency, up to 600 parts could potentially fail, resulting in the loss of the mission and crew.
Every part in it was built by the low bidder, you know. So I mean, when you're sitting on top of the thing, I mean, like you know better than anybody else how complicated it is, how many moving parts there are in it, you know. I mean, the wiring in the thing could wire a small city, and every inch of it is full of exploding fuel. You know, I mean, it's equivalent to sitting on top of an H-bomb or an A-bomb, I mean, or enough of a bomb to where you don't care what kind of bomb it is. I mean, you're gone if it doesn't work right.
But here we are, spent all our lives in a risk environment. You acknowledge that fact going in, and you don't dwell on it. You don't let it bother you. If the damn thing blows up, you're going to be dead. That's the least of the consequence. I'd rather do that than get smashed up and spend the rest of my life as an invalid.
It was the ultimate experience as a test pilot, the ultimate flight. I don't care how many times you've flown or what you've flown, this was going to be the ultimate trip. And turned out that way for me.
These test pilot astronauts spent all of their lives learning how to fly, learning to be pilots, be at the controls. On launch day, all they could do was strap in and ride the rocket like passengers on a bus. So it was a very nervous time for them.
Well, every launch day is a time of excitement, enthusiasm, and apprehension. But I think in most circumstances, you always feel that the chances of actually lifting off are fairly distant or remote, and you have to temper your enthusiasm with the realization that, in fact, you may be coming back in and trying to go another day.
The heart rates that they monitored in mission control, I mean, like almost invariably showed higher heart rates during launch than at any other portion of the flight, including when they would land on the moon. Because when they're landing, they're driving it. You know, when they're blasting off, they're just sitting there. And they were as scared as they ever got.
I can recall the fellow in the house of in the mission control was counting down 10, 9, 8, ignition sequence start. 7, 6. Now, he said that, but still, its engines are 360 feet away, so I didn't feel anything. And 4, 3. When he said 3, then I began to feel a shaking and a rattling. And when I was observing, as I observed the shaking and rattling, it was more than I imagined. It was more than I thought was safe. And I can recall thinking, maybe this is going to come apart. Maybe this is shaking more than it should, certainly more than any airplane I'd ever been on. Just was tremendous vibration. And as this ran through my head, I hear him say, 1 liftoff.
People said that when that vehicle left the ground, it shook so much that the ground vibrated. You couldn't prove it by me. I was sitting in the top of it. I think my knees were shaking. But there again, it was vibrating so much you couldn't tell.
I remember the vehicle really started shaking from side to side. It was just a slow acceleration as it lifted off and took 10, 11 seconds to clear the tower. And I thought they'd never say tower clear. And the whole time it was shaking like crazy. I thought there was something wrong with it. So I didn't know whether it was going to go in orbit or not. But John was real cool, and he said we'd go. And sure enough, we went, shaking like crazy during the whole first stage.
But that was the first time human beings left the Earth. And historically, I think that's the way history is going to look back at these flights, is not that they landed on the moon, but that they left the Earth.
I remember looking at the window saying, I hope that doesn't break. You know, still you can see through it. I'm going to die. That's a feeling that I haven't had much of my life, that death was 5 inches away.
We looked out the window, and the Earth was in our window just like that, in the black ground, and it started to get flat. You no longer saw it in 3 dimensions. It's about that time when you're going to the moon, I personally and the other fellows that were with me, we started to wonder if we hadn't bitten off more than we could chew.
They weren't looking at the moon on the way out there. They were looking back over their shoulder at home as it got smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. And if you go around and you talk to them all, they'll talk to you about the Earth more than the moon, more than anything else. I mean, they'll talk poetry about what the Earth looks like.
And I can remember looking back at the Earth and seeing it go. At first it goes away very fast, almost like the fastest elevator. And it's big and it's starting to get small, but it's going away. And you're thinking, boy, everybody's going away that I've ever known. They're going that way, and the 3 of us are going this way. And it kind of is shocking. And I can remember looking at the Earth when it got about that big then and thinking, you know, everybody I've ever known, they're all back there. And here we are. There's billions back there. Here we are here. And it's kind of scary, but I wanted to be there, but still kind of frightening.
The Earth, as it appears from the moon, is a very small and fragile object. And when you think about it, that's not an inaccurate description. Certainly a lot of the things that we do down here can affect the balance in a very fragile way. The greenhouse effect we're noticing today, for example, the changes between a healthy atmosphere and an unhealthy atmosphere are very subtle, very, very fragile, and you sort of get that feeling when you look at the Earth from a great distance.
The first landing on the moon by Apollo 11 proved to be much more difficult than anyone had ever anticipated. There were concerns as to whether or not the lunar module would perform up to expectations, and if Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin would even survive the landing.
And this room that we're in becomes alive. As soon as you can hear the noise, the hum in the background as people are talking, but it's when you put your headset on and plug into the console, all of a sudden, you know, these many loops, many people talking simultaneously. And there now you start hearing crispness. I mean, boy, crisp, clarity, decisions. I mean, people are communicating. They're right on top of the job, and all of a sudden it starts to sink in on you that, hey, today's the day.
The flight director, Gene Kranz, come on the intercom, and he gave us a speech that I think General Patton would have been proud of. He said, folks, we're here. We are going to succeed. You've been trained. You know what to do. And we're going to go do it. But then he said something was even better. He said, but no matter how it turns out, I'm going to be with you. And no matter what you do, I'm going to be right behind you. And you can't imagine what that meant to a bunch of young fellows who, like myself, were only 25 or 26 years old.
Okay, it's go there, Capcom on the hot fire. Okay, all flight controllers going around the horn, gonna go for undocking. Okay, retro, go. Fido, go. Guide, go. Control, go. Telcom, go. GNC, go. Ecom, go. Surgeon, go. Capcom, we're go for undocking.
Your brain's moving, your thoughts are moving, your thinking strategy, you're on your toes, you're ready for anything. And at this time here, I really came to the feeling, and I think this was true throughout the room, that says, hey, we're gonna land on the moon today. But we didn't have time to think about that long, because very shortly thereafter, we had our first of several program alarms during this period of time.
A series of computer alarms at the most critical phase of landing threatened the outcome of the entire mission. In the hot seat was a 26-year-old flight controller, Steve Bales, who had the power to pull the plug on the world's first manned lunar landing.
.1201, it sounds as 4 little 4 little numbers sounds sort of ho-hum, but what it really means is, hey, bud, I had too much to do that last second. I didn't get it all done, and I hope that I've done the most important things. And it's up to you to figure out if I've done the most important things, because I'm going on, I can't stop. And that's what that was all about. We'd have called an abort, but potentially loss of mission, big-time loss of mission. That was the concern. The good news is training carried us through. We knew what to do.
In our simulations, we're accustomed to having a large number of these kinds of difficulties. So I didn't feel that this was an oppressive situation, not that we weren't concerned about it.
That last minute or so was really, really tense, and the tension in mission control was so real you could cut it with a knife, and I'm just babbling along on these, you know, giving them updates and this and that and the other, and Deke Slayton was sitting right next to me during that final few minutes, and about the last minute, he hit me in the side and said, whispered, "Shut up, Charlie, and let them land."
Listen, Tranquility base here. The Eagle has landed.
I had to keep talking, I had to keep working, because I had a series of stay-no-stay decisions that we had to make. Because in case the LEM spacecraft had been damaged during the descent, or some of the temperatures, possibly we got into a soft landing area where it started to tip off, we had to be ready to abort at any time. So I had to keep my controllers, my entire team grinding away for what we call the T1 stay-no-stay decision.
A newspaper person who was a friend that was also foreign, and I thought had reasonably leftist leanings, and anyhow, we were having this discussion, and this person was absolutely convinced that the United States government propaganda office somewhere had written these great words for Neil to say.
Diathlete for mankind.
Then I said, okay, if you think that that's the case, we'll sit down here and we'll figure out what I'm going to say. So I figured I'd say something to the effect, you know, it may have been a little one for Neil, but it was a big one for a little fellow like me, seeing I was the shortest person in the office. I bet this person $500, which was a reasonably large sum of money in those days. I thought that if I could get $500 off a communist, that was probably pretty good. Person then realized that there wasn't propagandists, but they reneged on the bet, and I never won the money. I was never paid.
I think I was relieved by the ease that we had in being able to maneuver around. Perhaps impressed by the talcum powder nature of the fine surface itself. As you'd look at a boot print, it just was so smooth, just like you'd just put your foot in talcum powder.
On the Earth, with all that equipment on in a backpack, we weighed 360 pounds, and you could barely move your big troll. But when you're on the moon and you only weighed 60 pounds, so the jump was delightful.
I would just feel good. It's a good feeling because everything about you is lighter, and so I felt stronger. I felt like this is a great day. You know, I can jump. Look how high I can jump. Look at how light this is. I just grab this and move it over here, and normally it's pretty heavy. So it gave me a feeling of being strong and fast, and and feeling good. It was like the best day of a life because all this strength is here, you think.
We decide to do the Moon Olympics. I decide to try to set the high jump record on the moon. And as I start to do that, I bounce a couple of times, and then I fall over backwards. And as I fall over backwards, fear strikes. If I split my suit open, I'm dead. As John helps me up, I get very, very quiet as I listen to the pumps and the oxygen flow in the suit. Fortunately, the suit holds, and my fear subsides.
There were several times that I fell down up there, usually from backing up and hitting a rock or something like that. I would fall so much more slowly on the moon than I did on the Earth, that I never was in danger of puncturing myself. If I started to fall backwards on Earth, I'd just go plunk. But there, falling slowly with that light gravity, I could usually turn around and just catch myself very easily with my hands, and then I could just push like that and push right back up.
Being on the moon is you're unprepared for visually what everything looks like. I mean, like, there's no sense of scale or distance, you know. I mean, like, even out in the desert, you know, you see a telephone pole a half a mile away, you know. I mean, to where, like, that telephone pole cues you what your distances are. There's nothing on the moon. You know, there is no way to tell how far away anything is. I mean, everybody had an incredibly difficult time finding their way around. Later on, when they were taking the rover out there, they were getting lost, you know. I mean, like, they had to be very careful about where they were going.
You can't tell distance or size on the surface of the moon. You have nothing relatively to judge distance by except the lunar module itself. And when you take that rover and you drive 15 or 20 kilometers away and go over the hills and around a bend, it's very difficult to find it in the first place, much less use it to judge distance or size.
Shortly after the flight, somebody asked him, how did you guys navigate on the moon? And Al said, I don't know, I just followed Pete. I had a hard time finding what the right craters, just because I didn't lose my sense of direction, but I sure wasn't really positive which crater was which.
The Earth is 230 or 40,000 miles away, and when you hold up your thumb like this, you can only see the blue clouds, the blue surface and the clouds, and you can hold up your thumb and cover up the Earth. And if that doesn't worry you, well, nothing ever will.
I'm in awe of what God has given us. It's the beauty of Earth. Of course, from space, that jewel of Earth, that blue and white ball hanging up there, it's just the eye can behold that beauty. It makes it seem alive. And I do remember one time holding my hand up, and underneath my hand was the Earth. And a thought passed my mind that, you know, underneath my hand is 5 billion people, or 4 billion, whatever it was in those days.
We've all been impressed with this view of the Earth, and I think our lives will never be the same because we've had that rare opportunity to see the Earth from far away.
It was a spiritual journey. You know, I mean, like, that's supposed to be true of every big journey of our life. There's supposed to be a spiritual journey, or there's supposed to be a spiritual component of the physical journey. And it was equally true for those men. It was true of that journey. The biggest journey humans have ever taken also had a powerful spiritual component.
On the control pedestal of this little car, Dave Scott left a Bible, a red leather Bible. You can just see it there on the control pedestal, and not too many people know that it's there.
Extension, you guys. We feeling good. If that all we're going to do tonight was sit around and talk.
One of the funny things that happened during a flight, I have a twin brother named Bill, and Bill's a doctor in our hometown in South Carolina. Well, during the mission, there I am bouncing around on the moon, and my brother walks into mission control. He gets a pass, and he wants to sit on the flight surgeon's console. And a few people knew he was coming in, but I mean, the whole room looked over, I understand, looked at him, and they looked at the TV, and they looked at, you know, and they thought they were, what's happened here? And then all of a sudden they realized the word got around it was my twin brothers. We are identical. So that created a few stares and a few laughs in mission control.
After all the scientific experiments had been performed, and after all the moon rocks had been collected, these astronauts still found time to have some fun.
We're on the way up there, and I said, you know, when we get to the time we're going to have a little fun in lunar gravity, I'm going to whack a couple of golf balls. And he said, geez, you tell anybody about that? And I said, yeah, I talked to the boss at Giruth, and I told him that the things are all screwed up there, that on the surface that I wouldn't fool with it because we could be accused of being frivolous, wasting taxpayers' money and so on. And so he said if things were not going well, that I wouldn't do it, but if things are going fine, then I would go ahead and hit these two golf balls.
Raise the die. One more.
The backup crew must have gone through the library of Playboy magazines, right, and kept clipping out Miss Playboy or the month or this, that, and the other thing, interspersing those pictures throughout the checklist.
Got through those pages, and I had to turn the page again, and then wound up with the Playmate of the Month, and that one really did take me by surprise. I was not expecting that at all. And of course I couldn't say anything about it over the radio, so I was doing a lot of laughing, and people they weren't sure why I was laughing, but I don't think they wanted to ask why I was laughing either. So, you know, some of the outside people thought that I was being very frivolous, and I might have even been intoxicated on the moon, but that wasn't the case at all. I was just laughing at these in-jokes, and I obviously couldn't talk about it over the air.
You gotta get this control there, bro. Come on, dude. Well, in my left hand I have a feather. In my right hand a hammer. And I guess one of the reasons we got here today was because of a gentleman named Galileo a long time ago, who made a rather significant discovery about falling objects in gravity fields. And we thought that where would be a better place to confirm his findings than on the moon. And so we thought we'd try it here for you. The feather happens to be appropriately a falcon feather for our falcon. And I'll drop the two of them here, and hopefully they'll hit the ground at the same time. How about that? Proves that Mr. Galileo was correct in his findings.
A lot of people think that we did all this moon work in a secret movie lot in Arizona. And of course I have the gray hairs, and so does Charlie Duke, to prove that we were up there.
Especially the old-timers in South Carolina, you know, we did it with mirrors in Arizona or something, you know. It's amazing how many people don't believe we actually went to the moon. And I tease everybody. I say, well, I don't know where they sent those other guys, but I know they sent me to the moon.
For those who haven't read the plaque, we'll read the plaque that's on the front landing gear of this LEM. It says, "Dear men from the planet Earth, first set foot upon the moon, July 1969 AD. It came in peace for all mankind." It has the crew members' signatures and the signature of the President of the United States.
An idea we had before the flight to get the whole family involved was to have a picture taken. So we had a picture taken of our family in the backyard, and I got permission from NASA to let me take this picture along and leave it on the moon. They said, well, sure, no problem. So on the back of this photograph of our family, we wrote something to the effect of, this is This is the family of astronaut Charlie Duke from planet Earth, who landed on the moon in April of 1972, and then we left it on the moon, and so I pitched it out on the moon and took a picture of the picture.
That's just Apollo 17's visit to the Valley of Torres Litro, but as an everlasting commemoration of what the real meaning of Apollo is to the world, we'd like to uncover a plaque. The words are, "Here man completed his first exploration of the moon, December 1972 AD. May the spirit of peace in which we came be reflected in the lives of all mankind." This is our commemoration that will be here until someone like us, till some of you who are out there who are the promise of the future, come back to read it again and to further the exploration and the meaning of Apollo.
The thing about the moon that I thought was peculiar was that it seemed to depend on the angle of the sun. When the sun was almost overhead and it was noon down below, the moon appeared to be a warm and a friendly place. On the other hand, near dawn or dusk, it became very foreboding looking. The craters cast very long shadows, and the place looked distinctly unfriendly. So I was intrigued by the contrast based purely on what angle the sun happened to be coming from.
The command module pilots were the only people who were ever by themselves. You know, I mean, the other two guys would go down and land on the moon, and they were real busy all the time. They had mission control talking to them constantly. So they never had time to just kind of sit back and think about where they were. But the command module pilots, I mean, like, stayed in orbit all by themselves, half of which they were on the dark side of the moon and couldn't even talk to Earth if they wanted to. So they had plenty of time to kind of sit back and just look around and realize, wow, I'm at the moon.
Well, I enjoyed being in the command module by myself. It was a happy little home. All the machinery was working properly, and my concerns were not within the command module, but simply that something might go wrong with the LEM, with the lunar module, and these two guys might get stuck on the surface of the moon. That was my main concern.
We did train, or I did train to return by myself. Went through all of the mission activities that I would have had to have operated the command module by myself as opposed to having three people. But I never concerned myself with that, and I knew they were going to come back. It would have been a very, very unpleasant day if they hadn't, let me tell you. That'd have been 3 days of pure, not terror, but real sorrow to come back alone. I don't even like to contemplate that.
I don't either.
Well, I'm sure you don't.
No?
Once the crew entered the lunar module for the last time, there were literally hundreds of things they had to do, from securing moon rocks in their gear to checking and testing the various parts of their lunar module, ensuring its safe return to the command module.
We know that there are 200 ways that the lunar module engine could fail to start. It was a pretty tense time.
And the ground wasn't saying anything, and all of a sudden, I began to think that we still have radio contact, you know, with the ground, because nobody had said anything for quite a long period. So we called him and asked him, and Pete said to me, I can remember him saying, "You getting a little nervous?" I said, "Yeah."
"But you'll get over it." I said, "You know, this is your first ride." I said, "Besides, Al, if it doesn't light, look at it this way. We become the first permanent monument to the U.S. space program on the moon."
I said, "Yeah, that makes me feel real good."
Conrad had just sort of scratched that itch for a couple hours, you know? I mean, like, that's the way astronauts were.
No one will ever forget, and of course we've been reminded over and over again, Neil's first words on the surface of the moon. But not many people remember man's last words on the surface of the moon. We were sitting in the lunar module about 20 seconds before liftoff, and I looked over at Jack and I said, "Jack, let's get this mother out of here."
I was starting to form this thought. It didn't light. Just then the engine lit, and bang, it kicked us, And then from then on, it was a wild ride.
We had to burn 6 minutes and 5 seconds to get into orbit. And there's no gauges really on your ascent stage engine to see how it's doing. The idea being, if it isn't doing okay, what are you going to do about it?
It was like riding a fighter plane, and it was some ride. Man, feel this baby go, and that was the feeling we had then. And it was just exhilaration riding this thing back in orbit.
Pete leaned over to me and he says, you know, Al, how would you like to fly this thing? And I thought, well, that'd be fun, because I hadn't flown it up to that time. I'd just been doing my part of the job. And so as I started to put in my first thrust, I said, wait a minute, the people down in Houston at Mission Control aren't going to like this. And he said, don't worry, we're on the backside of the moon, they'll never know it. And sure enough, he thought of everything.
Back in orbit, both spacecraft came together to rendezvous, and after a quick inspection, the command module pilot performs the critical docking maneuvers required to link both spacecraft together. After the crew, moon rocks, and film were transferred to the command module, the lunar module was jettisoned, and the crew made their preparations for the 3-day trip back home.
But somehow going fast again made me feel like we were headed back home. And I think that Neil Armstrong said that the time he felt like they were going to pull off the mission is when he got in orbit. And I agree, because you're going fast again. You feel like once you're going fast, you don't have to go a little bit faster, and then you can head on home. So it was a really good feeling to get into orbit.
We were on track, and shortly thereafter we turned our spaceship around so we could see the moon. And the moon literally just began, we were climbing so fast the moon just literally just began to shrink just like that. And you could see it. I mean, literally a whole satellite that big, 2,000 miles in diameter, just began to shrink like this. And that was really spectacular. Then we had to settle down for the 3-day trip home. But that first hour or so was, we were glued to the windows watching that.
We have a perspective of the Earth as we sit here in this room. You have another perspective when you're driving down a freeway or flying an airplane, on a boat. You have another perspective in Earth orbit. An additional perspective of our home planet is when your lunar distance is 240,000 miles away.
This whole concept of whole Earth, that's a cliche that we all throw around now, but I mean, that's where it came from. These were the first humans to actually see the whole Earth. They took the first photographs of the whole Earth. You know, I mean, like, they really did appreciate the whole Earth before any of the rest of us. And they brought that feeling back with them. And I think it is slowly communicated out to the rest of us. But that's the biggest lesson I think I learned from talking to them, is how important leaving the Earth was to them, and then, of course, coming back to it.
Our trajectory was such on the way home that about 100,000 miles out, it was 100, wasn't it? That we nipped in the line where the Earth fully eclipsed the sun, and we were between the Earth and the moon. And so what we had was an absolute full moon behind us, and for the first time, an eclipsed night Earth, so that there was no sun, and instead of seeing a black, as you see in the photographs, you don't see the night Earth. What we did see was the full night Earth in moonshine, in full moonshine. We could see the land masses, we could see thunderstorms from 100,000 miles out, we could distinguish the ocean and the clouds, and I think we're the only ones that saw that.
Coming back, the command module hits the atmosphere at essentially escape velocity, 26 to 28,000 miles an hour. It comes in just like a meteor, and the gases ionize around it to where the crew is cut off from radio communications. Normally, it's about 3 minutes.
You always worried about the parachutes on the command module. Where we had one flight where only 2 of the 3 worked, and so the rate of descent was higher. So you're always concerned about that part of the mission.
We were coming down very fast, wondering, would the spacecraft survive the impact? Would we survive the impact? A lot of thoughts racing through our mind. We really couldn't communicate. I was responsible for reading the checklist, and I had difficulty reading the checklist because the helicopter crew that was circling us kept saying, fellows, don't worry about it, you're going to be all right. But they kept repeating themselves so much, I really wondered if they knew what they were talking about. So we were coming down on 2 chutes and a prayer, but finally we hit the water and we did survive, and Apollo 15 was home.
One of my jobs, sitting in the right-hand seat with a little window in front of me, was to take a 16mm camera and mount it in the window. After the main chutes came out, take and dismount the camera and set it in a bag next to my seat. During the entry, everything went as planned, but somehow I got behind the checklist, and when it came time to dismount the camera, for some reason, I decided not to take it off the bracket and put it in the bag. When we hit the water, that camera and bracket came off the mount, which I didn't know it would do, but such a hit, and it hit me right here. In fact, I thought that if that thing had hit me in the middle of the head, it might have killed me, because it really came off there. And fortunately, it hit me a glancing blow, and apparently it knocked me a little unconscious. It was luck, because I think if I'd had a little bad luck, I could have gotten killed right there just because I didn't follow the checklist.
More than the moon rocks, and more than Tang, and more than these things that we learned and that we've built, you know, I mean, because I think that it did expand our awareness and our understanding of who we are and our role in the universe. I mean, like, what does this beautiful blue-green globe have to do with all the rest of it? You know, I mean, and we know more about our role in the universe because of those flights.
But you tend to see mankind as one and as a common thread going through it, because we're all on that little ball. And when you just the distance to the moon puts you on a little ball that all of us that is sort of insignificant, and yet there are 3 billion of us, and we've got to learn how to get along on this Earth. And I think that perspective of mankind, the uniqueness of the oneness of mankind, is probably the most significant thing I've gotten from the flight over the long term.
You know, we got to learn to love one another and get along, and then we can solve our problems through man's technology.
Sure, we have a lot of problems here on Earth, and sure, they need to be solved, but they're not going to be solved by not expanding our knowledge, and that's what space exploration is all about. Expanding human knowledge is just fundamentally critical for people right now. We're at the stage in human civilization where if we don't use our brains, we're probably not going to make it. We're not going to be able to make it with our muscles anymore. We're going to have to think about these things. We're going to have to go out there, find new knowledge, look at that new knowledge, and apply it to solving the problems of tomorrow.
It was certainly one of the great adventures of our generation, and it's the sort of thing that people in the future are going to be doing. Many of the youngsters alive on the Earth today will get their chance to go into space, either to the moon or to Mars, and certainly their kids and their grandkids are going to go. So maybe they'll be curious to see how it was done.
I hope that Apollo brought new light to the people of the Earth, so that indeed we can regard the Earth differently, we can regard ourselves differently, and we have been enriched by that experience.
Some of them speak to very eloquently. You know, I think the way they talk about the Earth is a big part of that. You know, I mean, to where like the Earth became a personality and a character and a living thing for all of these men, instead of just this abstract place where we all live. And that was great, you know. I mean, I think that, to me, validates the adventure or the journey.
We brought back a belief in American craftsmanship at this period of time, because it was an American flag that was planted in the moon. It was American craftsmanship that got there. We brought back a sense of wonder and mystery. It was probably one of the expansionist periods for science and technology. Kids wanted to become astronauts. Everybody wanted to see them. They brought back this resurgence, this interest, this vitality that has always been American.
The war that we really must solve if we're going to be successful in the next century is a war that nobody knows we're in, and that's a war on ignorance. If we solve that war, we can whip all the other things in the process. That's what space exploration is all about, expanding our knowledge of what's going on around us. And boy, it's in its infancy. And I think it's important to do it now because I don't know how much time we've got, the human race does. We need to get smarter, and we need to learn better how to control our destinies. And I think space exploration is a key to that.
I don't see exploring space as ignoring earthly problems so much as it's a different way to grow. You know, we have to grow our way out of our problems. And that's a very serious way to grow. You know, you learn a lot doing it. You learn a lot about yourself doing it. You learn a lot about the planet you just left, you know. And I think that's important. It can all be useful to the growing experience of the human race. But what I think ought to be really important in the way we think about these flights is to realize that going to the moon wasn't the important part. That's just the first place you can stop. What really matters about Apollo is those were the first people to leave the Earth, to go anywhere. You know, in the next 500 years, if we don't destroy ourselves, who knows where we'll go? You know, I mean, there's a whole universe out there waiting for us.
The astronauts who left the Earth and walked on the moon are considered the greatest of all explorers and adventurers. They risked everything in the search for answers about the origin of our solar system, and their efforts were the fulfillment of a dream as old as humanity. When Gene Cernan last stepped off the lunar surface in December 1972, it marked the end of the golden era of lunar exploration. Like all other pioneering explorers, these men have led the way for future astronauts and lunar colonists who will once again take those same risks and leave the Earth on a continuing quest for the secrets of the universe.